Good morning, everyone. My name is Zachary God. I go by Kaibon the Renegade on YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. And today I'm going to read you my book, Godling Legacies, A Tale of Gales. It's a side series book in the Godly series. There's Godly, it's the main 7-book series. And then Godling Legacies is the side books that go along with it. You don't need to know too much about the main series to get involved in these books, which is why I'm putting them out as free audiobooks. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and let's just go ahead and get right into it. This is supposed to be narrated by a woman. Just keep that in mind. The narrator's name is Vidal Godly, and you'll meet her partway through the series. So this book is dedicated to Betty, Jim, and Colleen York. Without those three, I would never have had the hope to write my series. I love them all, and I miss my Nana. Every book in the Godly series is dedicated to the children I hope to have in the future, and Damian Morse. Chapter 0. Godly. Jacob Godly had thought himself a mostly ordinary boy until he was 14 years old. He grew up in Athens, Greece, learning, making friends, and living the life of a regular child with his best friend Damon. One fateful night, the city was attacked by chimeras under the control of a mysterious primordial god named Chaos who wanted to capture them. After narrowly escaping with their lives, Jacob and Damon fled their homeland and stumbled across the city of Lamia, home to a powerful demigod named Nicolo. Nicolo was the son of Heracles and a monster hunter of incredible strength named Nephili, and he was reared into a powerful young demigod through the teaching of his mother and the gods themselves. Heracles met his end not long after Nicolo was born, so when he reached the ripe age of 15, he was called upon by the gods to receive the training of a demigod proper. Fast forward 3 years to meeting Jacob and Damon, and Nicolo had reached power unlike anything he had ever imagined and grown well adjusted to his new place in the world as a hero. Upon meeting the boys, he had a feeling that there was something special about him, but his instinct was confused when they accidentally used the power of elementalism to protect themselves from a dragon that had injected themselves into their simple training exercise. While elementalism alone isn't inherently divine, Nicolo was struck by the fact that the boys seemed to have near total resistance to the element of their affinity. Jacob was able to stand in dragon fire without getting burned or even having a hair singed out of place, while Damon was able to be struck by lightning, seemingly without being harmed in the least. Taking his knowledge and running with it, Nicolo brought them to Mount Olympus to be tested and trained in preparation for a divine tournament among demigods. Jacob was trained by Nike, goddess of victory, while Damon was trained by Enyo, goddess of war, the same goddess who trained Nicolo himself. 2 years passed while the boys trained under their divine masters, and when Jacob finally finished his training, there were only about 2 weeks left until the tournament. Our story takes place about 4 days after Jacob finished his studies, while Damon was still putting the final touches on his technique. Our story starts tonight in Godling Legacies, A Tale of Gales. Chapter 1. Prowling Hunter. It was just after nightfall when Jacob returned to his room from the dining hall. Olympus was a bountiful, plentiful oasis above the clouds. It seemed so simple from the main halls, but once you enter a divine's realm, you never know where you'll be headed. It could be a swath of land from the world below, or a place between this reality and the next. Unfathomable differences separating their home from reality, or a simple little world of the divine's creation. Jacob's realm was the latter when he was still just a fledgling demigod, as were the other rooms of his comrades in the barracks. It was a simple, small little place with nothing but a desk, chair, a bed, and a window. Since arriving, Jacob had been entrusted to watch over Lupus, a tiger Nike had shrunk down to the size of a kitten, but he'd returned him to Nike for a couple of days, planning on going down to Lamia with Nicolo to spend some time with his family and get off Olympus for some fresh air. He entered his room and noticed the moon rising over the clouds. It would be full in just a few days. Something about that captured Jacob's attention, but as his focus waned, his eyes drew to his reflection in the window. His brown hair was short and his face was freshly shaven as his deep green eyes stared back at him from the pane, boredom lingering in their stare. Jacob sighed to himself before changing from his usual clothes into the outfit Nicolo had lent him. It was a simple blue button-up with long sleeves, along with a pair of form-fitting dark red pants and a long black jacket that hung to his knees. He checked himself in the reflection before sighing again. I really like this jacket. Maybe Nicolo will let me borrow it for a while longer if I ask nicely, he mused. Something about that thought brought a smile to his face, and he found himself wearing it during his entire descent of Mount Olympus. It didn't take long to pass through Olympus's shortcut and head down the base of the mountain. He ended up waiting by himself a few moments and found that his eyes were drawn to the moon. Niccolo arrived at such incredible speed that he flashed close like a streak of light breaking the horizon, approaching Jacob within less than 2 seconds. Niccolo stopped with precision in front of him, skidding less than a few meters as he caught Jacob's attention before a gust of powerful wind blasted past them. Niccolo smiled brightly, and Jacob shared a confident smirk with him as the wind exploded by, knowing speaking would be a waste of breath until it passed. The backdraft cleared, and Jacob heard a slight whistle in the wind as it carried on beyond them. Niccolo was a tall young man with very short red hair, brown eyes, and he carried a large hammer made of bone and green crystal on his back. He was wearing a long red tunic that hung to his knees and covered his arms, and a brown leather vest he had buttoned all the way up. "Hey man, you ready?" Niccolo asked confidently. "Yeah, something tells me this'll be fun," Jacob affirmed. Niccolo nodded, but his pupils were taken by something rising in the sky behind him. Jacob noticed the bright light reflecting off his eyes and traced them as he turned around. He was shocked to find an odd, dark red streak of light rising into the sky with the moon directly overhead. They both watched as the light climbed higher and higher, slowly, seeming like it was gradually losing a momentum. But then, they needed to shield their eyes as the light burst like a firework, exploding and crackling as the strange red power fizzled out. "What the heck was that?" "No idea. I've never seen anything like that before," Niccolo said, sounding concerned. "What do you think? Should we go check it out?" he asked, seeming conflicted. "What about your mom and sisters?" Jacob asked. "Oh, well, I am known for showing up a little late," Niccolo said with a sly smile and a chuckle. It brought a smile back to Jacob's lips. "All right, let's go then." Niccolo nodded in agreement, and the two headed off at a high speed. They followed the road and rushed across the countryside to the north. They passed several travelers, but as they got closer to where they thought the strange light had come from, Niccolo grabbed Jacob's arm and got him to stop. "Look, over there," Niccolo pointed out. Jacob was shocked to find him pointing into a clearing in the forest where they saw a young woman in a strange garb, running from something. Her clothes were shamanistic and featured a helm that looked like a gray wolf's head. Her flowing garb drifted behind her as a medallion tapped her chest with every step. She had deep blue eyes and was running with a strange gnarled staff in her hand, and she was missing her right arm entirely. Her outfit didn't have a hole or a sleeve where her arm would have been, and she wore a simple Greek sandals as she dashed through the trees. However, Niccolo wasn't pointing at her. Instead, he was pointing towards a large creature unlike anything Jacob had ever seen. It was a large, black-furred, humanoid wolf creature. It had strange, stretched limbs and razor-sharp claws, yet its hips sat flush with its waist, and it ran after her upright on 2 legs. It had brightly glowing red eyes and snarled and drooled as it chased after her with incredible speed. The young woman was shocked as she came to a dead end on her path and had to start scrambling up a steep incline to keep making distance. Jacob and Niccolo were just moving to help her when she pushed herself up on the ledge and stood tall. The strange wolf creature gave pause as it snarled and looked at her. "Do it now, Cardi!" she called out. The creature was startled and lunged up the incline, leaping across the gap between them with ease, but it was struck by a large, armored gray wolf, pouncing upon its prey and latching onto its jugular. The wolf knocked the creature right out of the air and down onto its back. The monster struggled and yelped with fright, but the wolf ripped its throat open without hesitation. Jacob and Niccolo gave pause as the young woman looked to them with surprise, seemingly wondering what they wanted. Niccolo seemed to realize what happened and took his opportunity. "Are you all right, miss?" he asked, approaching cautiously. "Yes, I'm just fine," she said, seeming a little shaken. "What's happened here, and what is that thing?" Niccolo asked. "I'm not sure. I encountered it a little farther up the road, and it attacked us." "Cardi, don't eat that. Come here," she beckoned. The gray wolf immediately stopped ripping flesh from the creature's bones, swallowed, and approached her. "Good girl. Thank you for protecting me," she said, reaching into a pouch at her side and pulling out a small chunk of cured red meat before handing it to her. Cardi accepted it with a snap of delight and ate it up quickly before pressing the top of her head against the woman's shoulder. She smiled and scratched her ear before standing up and returning her attention to the pair. "We saw you running from that thing and had a mind to come and help you, but I'm glad you're well protected," Niccolo said with a chuckle as he looked down to Cardi. The wolf growled at him, so he stopped. "Yeah, I'll say. I hope there aren't more creatures like that one running around," Jacob said, unable to take his eyes from the odd beast sprawled out on the ground. "Me too. My daughter and ex-husband moved up north to Sofia last year, and I'm worried that monster may have been near their new home," she said, looking concerned. After a moment, she met their eyes and offered them each a handshake. "I'm Lial of Tomis, and this is my companion, Loyal Cardosa." "Nice to meet you. I'm Jacob of Athens," he introduced as he shook her hand. "And I'm Niccolo of Lamia." "Nice to meet you." So, what brings you two so far north? Lial asked. Well, we saw this strange red light shoot up into the sky, and we sort of fancy ourselves as adventurers. Right, Jacob? Niccolo said, stifling a chuckle and nudging him with his elbow. Jacob nodded in reply. Oh, you saw it too? That's one of the big reasons I decided to come up this way in the first place, Lial explained with concern. So that light drew you in too, Jacob remarked, putting a hand to his chin. Yes, I saw it about 3 days ago, and I've been traveling north ever since. I wanted to check on my family, but also, I've heard tell of a legendary creature who lives around here, Lial said. A legendary creature? And you think it was making that light? Niccolo asked. Lial shrugged. Dunno. I read about it in letters my daughter sent me. Apparently, it's the legendary guardian of the city of Sophia, but that's all I know. Dawn didn't talk about it much, she explained. Interesting. Well, if we're going to investigate this light, maybe we could work together, Niccolo offered pleasantly. They all nodded. That sounds alright. You two don't look like much, but at least you're armed. Besides, the more hands the better, she said. She started heading toward the road with Cardi at her side as Jacob and Niccolo shared a wry smile with each other. After that, they returned to the road. It only took them about 30 minutes to reach the city of Sophia at a walking pace. They were all rather quiet on their way, each seemingly having something different on their mind. It was a beautiful place of stone architecture and cobble streets and had a large castle in the northwestern side of the city. The only thing breaking the rocky, grassy plain surrounding it being the cobble fences and walkways. It took a bit of looking, but they eventually found an inn. Niccolo was nice enough to cover the cost for Jacob, but Lial didn't rent a room. Hey, how come you aren't getting a room? Jacob asked. Niccolo smirked. She's probably going to stay with her family, he said. But he was surprised when she shook her head. No, I prefer sleeping out under the stars these days. Besides, I don't have any money, Lial said with a shrug, seeming entirely unbothered. Oh, that sucks. I know. Why don't you come stay with us? This inn can offer you a warm meal at the very least, Niccolo offered kindly. Lial seemed to think about it for a moment before she nodded. All right, thank you, she said with a polite bow. Niccolo led them upstairs to the simple 2-bedroom the three of them were going to share, and they all started getting set to relax. Jacob counted them lucky they had a window right where they had seen the light coming from, and it was quite open, so it would be easy to track the light down if it fired off again. He found his eyes glued to the window for the majority of the evening, and noticed Niccolo was also watching when he managed to tear his eyes away. Why don't you take the bed, Jacob, and you can have the other one, Lial, Niccolo offered pleasantly. That's all right. I'll join Cardoza on the floor. You've already been quite generous, she said, seeming a little uncomfortable. Are you sure you don't want the bed? Didn't you say you usually sleep outside? I would think that would be a nice change of pace, Niccolo speculated as he crossed his arms. Yes, I'll be all right. I've grown accustomed to roughing it on the hard ground. Believe it or not, this floor will be more comfortable than where I've been sleeping lately, Lial said. Cardi chuffed like a horse's whinny before snorting and curling up beside her on the floor. Lial just chuckled and patted her, getting comfortable with her companion. Well, alright, if you're sure, Niccolo said. She nodded adamantly. Niccolo returned her nod before getting familiar with the accommodations. When he was done, he headed down to the kitchen to receive their dinner. While he was away, Lial excused herself to the restroom. When Niccolo returned, he asked, Where'd Lial go? Restroom, Jacob replied quickly. It's still pretty early. Part of me wants to get a jump on gathering info for tomorrow, he said, crossing his arms. Some part of me feels the same, but I'm way too tired, Niccolo said with a yawn. Jacob looked to his friend as Niccolo sat down and rested his eyes, a tray with 3 bowls of soup and some bread on his lap. Okay, Jacob said with a somewhat frustrated sigh. Niccolo opened his eyes with a wry look in them before passing Jacob his bowl and chuckling to himself. You're always overeager, huh? Niccolo asked. Jacob shrugged to himself. I guess so. I just want to feel free to go at my own pace, he explained. Just as he spoke, Lial returned. She entered, and Niccolo offered her some soup by simply handing it out to her. She accepted as she heard the end of Jacob's words and smiled softly. You want to be free, huh? I get that, she said, looking away. Well, kind of. I've just never really felt in control of my own life, Jacob explained. No one seemed to have anything to say as they looked down into their bowls. Jacob thought a moment before deciding to change the subject. What about you, Lial? What are you looking to get free of? Oh, nothing these days. In fact, I'm freer now than I've ever been. The only thing I want to be free of now is my worrying heart. But being a mother, something tells me that'll never go away, she explained with a fond smile. Oh, worrying about your daughter, right? Niccolo asked, making her nod. Yeah, that makes sense. My mom tells me she worries about me all the time, he said, with a bright smile as he scratched the back of his head. It brought a smile to Lial's face, too. Oh, come on. It's not like she has anything to worry about, Jacob said, making Niccolo chuckle. Maybe, but parents always worry about their kids. It's just normal, Niccolo replied. I think that's true, but some parents have more reason than others, they all said, suddenly looking dejected. Jacob and Niccolo glanced at each other, clearly able to see the concern written in the creases of Lial's face. Like what? Niccolo asked after a moment of uncomfortable silence. Well, while that light is worrisome, if I'm honest, I actually came to check on my daughter. My ex-husband, Randolphus, is, well, he's not a bad father anyway. He's just a little... I'm not sure what the right word is. Foolish, maybe. Foolish? Like he makes a lot of mistakes? Jacob asked. Yes and no. Please forgive me for dodging the question. I just don't want to speak ill of him, Lial explained, unable to look them in the eyes. What do you mean? Niccolo asked, sharing Jacob's concern. Well, he doesn't mean any harm by them, but he's very short-sighted about the future and always cooks up these odd get-rich-quick schemes that never work, and sometimes they have consequences, she explained, putting down her bowl and grabbing her side in discomfort. Consequences? You mean he's hurting people? Niccolo asked sternly, a grim look in his eye. Not on purpose, but he has before, yes, Lial explained. I was born in Thomas, but I'm not welcome there anymore because we were exiled after he tried selling some juniper berries he'd found a whole lot of. If he'd even bothered to ask me what they were, I could have told him they were poisonous in a moment, but he got 4 people sick and 2 were found dead before he was stopped, she said, cringing hard at what her ex-husband had done. They all sat in silence for several moments. Foolish sounds like a pretty apt description if you ask me, Niccolo said quietly, his fists clenched around the bottom of his tunic. Jacob just nodded, unable to express his discomfort. Yes, exactly. After we were exiled, I divorced him, but recently I stopped getting letters from Dawn, and I have to admit, I'm terrified that something's happened, Lial said, grabbing her side a little tighter. Cardosa sensed her great discomfort and moved a little closer, curling up beside her with her head facing her master. Lial seemingly unconsciously reached down and patted her, her body slowly starting to untense. Shouldn't we go find out what's going on? Jacob asked after a moment. Not yet, Lial said, surprising him. Why not? He replied. Because I haven't worked up the courage to face it if something really has happened, she replied. Jacob felt her pain but said nothing. She sighed and reached down for her bowl. She filled her spoon and lifted it to her lips, but paused a moment before losing her appetite completely as she returned the spoon to her bowl. Cardosa whined quietly. She smiled weakly and scratched Cardi's chin before placing the bowl down for her loyal companion. Chapter 2. Rising Stars.